The Handkerchief by Great 78. Chapter 20. Who Let the Dogs Out? The large prefect carriage on the Hogwarts Express was crowded. 4 houses, each with 6 prefects, made for a large group of generally outgoing, swotty do-gooders. He sat next to Pansy, who perched upon the bench seat with the air of a queen with her courtiers. She occasionally hooked her arm through his and smiled at him, trying to catch his eye. He was nervous, his eyes darting around to search the crowd, occasionally for Hermione. When she finally arrived with the weasel in tow, Draco was taken aback. Surely Dumbledore had not skipped over Potter for the badge. The idiot had won the Triwizard Tournament only a few months before. Both Potter and Dumbledore were getting called out in the press for being loons. What a strange choice, giving it to the weasel, who'd be lucky to scrape together a handful of OWLs, when Potter probably needed the vote of confidence. After their prefect meeting was over, Hermione stood a few moments, speaking with the Ravenclaw Patil-twin and the Hufflepuff, Hannah Abbott. The weasel boredly dug wax out of his ear, whilst chin-wagging with Ernie Macmillan. Draco disentangled his limbs from Pansy's iron grip. Just as he was about to stand, Pansy asked, in a sickly sweet voice, "Where are you rushing off to, Draco?" "Just need to see a wizard about crop pox. Did you have a good summer?" "Corking. I was hoping your mother might host a summer fete this year. No luck, I guess." "Yes, she was. Otherwise engaged. Most of the summer." Draco left off the fact that Narcissa had mostly stayed in her suite, unless Lucius insisted she emerged to entertain his friends at dinner. Hermione waved to the other 2 girls and exited the carriage. The weasel blathered on, oblivious. Draco wondered if he could catch her before Weasley caught up to her.
"Yes, my mother was likewise otherwise engaged."
Pansy gave a wry smile.
"Of course, that's her typical way of existing."
Letitia Parkinson was known as a day drunk, and a night one, when it came to it. "Should be a fun term, huh? Prefect duties and all," he ventured. His mind was distracted, wondering which direction Hermione might have walked when she left the prefect's carriage.
"Yes,"
Pansy responded dryly.
"Prefect duty."
She sneered at him, and he realized too late that he'd watched Hermione go out of the carriage and hadn't moved his eyes from the door since. Pansy huffed and turned to the 7th-year prefect, Slytherin boy, looking to flirt with someone who might return her affections, he supposed. The weasel was done gabbing with Ernie and slouched to the door, shoulder-checking Draco as he left. Draco sneered at him and followed a few steps behind. Weasley hurried to catch up with Hermione. Stepping out of the compartment door, Draco caught a bit of her brown curls down the train corridor and followed at a distance to her carriage, hoping she would drop off the weasel and continue on her own. No such luck. They entered and closed the door, and he passed by the compartment she'd entered without looking in. 2 doors down, Vince and Greg came out of a door and started following him. "What's up?" he asked. "Nothing," said Vince. Draco rolled his eyes. 8 weeks apart from these wankers, and they still had nothing to say. He decided to try his luck at baiting her and her friends. As fired up as she often was, it would at least give him some kind of interaction with her. "Shut up, Malfoy, and get out." Those were the only words she'd had for him. He wrenched to open the door to her compartment, elbow bumping Vince's fat stomach as he did so. Great, he thought. He was bringing his dumb pair of friends to confront her dumb pair of friends. That was always enjoyable. She sat with the girl Weasley and Potter, looking radiant as always. Potter looked put out, as though someone had taken the last chocolate frog. Oddly, The walls behind them had little gobs of black gelatinous goo sticking to it, and there was a strange, swampy smell to the air. The weasel was sandwiched between Longbottom, holding the world's ugliest plant, and, inexplicably, Luna Lovegood, a Ravenclaw 4th year. Draco vaguely thought she might be a very distant cousin of his, then quickly dismissed the thought to focus on the matter at hand.
"What?"
Potter barked flatly.
"Manners, Potter, or I'll have to give you a detention,"
Draco drawled. He touched his prefect badge lightly, the green metal shimmering against the black robes.
"You see, I, unlike you, have been made a prefect, which means that I, unlike you, have the power to hand out punishments."
"Yeah, but you, unlike me, are a git, so get out and leave us alone," Potter said harshly. The Gryffindors all laughed. Luna turned the page of her magazine, which Draco now noticed was upside down. She was really distracting. He shook his head and turned back to Potter.
"Tell me, how does it feel being second best to Weasley, Potter?"
"Shut up, Malfoy," said Hermione sharply. She looked up at him. No, she was looking above him, as though she didn't want to make eye contact. Well, she was going to bloody need to look him in the eye at some point.
"I seem to have touched a nerve," he smirked. "Well, just watch yourself, Potter, because I'll be dogging your footsteps in case you step out of line."
He gave Potter a hard stare. He and everyone else had seen Potter show up to the platform with a giant black dog. It hadn't acted like a regular dog, and Draco knew it had to be the animagus, his own cousin, Sirius Black. Potter needed to know how stupid it was for Sirius to be out in public. He thought Narcissa recognized him too, but she kept her eyes purposefully averted. It was with a jolt of shock that Draco put together that Narcissa and Sirius had likely grown up and attended Hogwarts together, being first cousins near in age. Potter had gotten lucky that the men at the Manor dinner that night with Pettigrew hadn't had children leaving on the Hogwarts Express that day. Well, except Lucius, who often forgot what had been discussed after his 6th fire whiskey. Draco had no doubt that Lucius would have gotten a Minister of Magic there in a heartbeat, if he had remembered. "Get out!" said Hermione. She stood and stepped towards him, copper eyes flaming. His silver eyes pleaded with hers for just a moment. She jerked her head slightly to her right. It was enough. He turned to go, pushing the backs of Vince and Greg to shuffle out of the compartment. Once out the door, he stopped Greg. "You guys go ahead, back to the compartment. I've got to take a piss." Vince and Greg lumbered past him, left up the train corridor. Draco turned right, hurrying to the front of the train. He ducked into the small, dark closet near the toilets where the trolley witch parked the trolley when the train was stopped. Taking a few deep breaths, Draco willed his heart to stop racing. She seemed fine. More than fine, even, apart from the fact that she told him to shut up and get out of her sight. Suddenly, the door to the closet was ripped open, then slammed closed, just as swiftly. "What was that absolute ridiculousness, Malfoy?" Hermione's voice seethed in the darkness. "You came." He breathed out a long-held breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, and reached out clumsily for her. His knuckles dragged across her jumper, and he found her arm in the pitch black. Tugging it free from where one arm was tightly tucked under the other, he pressed her fingers to his throat. "I missed you, Hermione." "You've done a crap job of showing it. The things you just said, just now, the things you said at the end of last term, on this very train. Not to mention the activities your father got up to last June." I know. I'm sorry. It's been bad this summer. At home. All kinds of people coming through the manor, meetings behind closed doors. Now that he'd started talking, he found it hard to stop. Hermione, they're planning things, collecting information. I don't know much about it, what the plans are, but you, people like you. It's like I said at the end of last year. You'll be an early target. You're so close to Potter, and he's going to be hunted. Draco, she said, leaning into him slightly. We know all of this. Our people, Professor Dumbledore's people, we're fighting it. The other side is organizing. Draco breathed a sigh of relief. Good. Thank the gods. That's good. So, what's their plans for you? His hand came up to her cheek, finding a stray curl next to it and wrapping it around his index finger. What do you mean? Her voice was confused. I mean, America, Canada. Somewhere in Eastern Europe, perhaps. If it's a matter of safe houses, the Black family has estates in Lithuania, Calgary, the Hamptons. I'm sure, if Sirius... Why are you listing off foreign countries? And what do you know about Sirius? Her confusion was growing deeper, mixed with alarm. He could tell. Hermione, you've got to get away from here. Great Britain isn't safe right now. For people like you. People like me! She cut in acerbely. Yes, like I've told you, and even Potter, to his face. They'll be looking for Muggleborns like you. And you, specifically. He realized his voice was growing louder, and might soon be heard over the train engines. He willed himself to calm down. Sirius. There's some on the Dark Lord's side who know about Sirius being alive, how he wasn't actually a Death Eater. This absolute wart of a tiny man came to dinner one night. Apparently he was friends with Sirius, Lupin, and Potter's father. He told several people all about it, how they were animagi, how he helped the Dark Lord return, how he framed Sirius. If Sirius is alive, he can help you escape. You saw Peter Pettigrew? Wait. How do you know Peter Pettigrew? He was stopped short, pulling back to search for her eyes in the dim greyness. It's a long story. He was disguised as Ron's rat for years, apparently. When we found out, he escaped before he was punished for his crimes. Harry saw him help you-know-who return in full form in that graveyard, before they called your father and all of his old friends back. My gods. A memory of a manky old rat sinking its yellowed teeth into Greg's finger when they first met Potter leaped to his mind. His eyes had become accustomed to the darkness at some point without him realizing it, and he found that he'd been staring into her warm copper eyes. I'm serious, Hermione. They've had you and your friends in their sights for years. My father has had it in for you, especially since second year. It's not safe for you here. We have Professor Dumbledore, and he'll keep us safe. Dumbledore is a doddering old fool. You've read what they're saying about him in the papers. He's not going to be a match for the Dark Lord. You need to leave. Take your Muggle parents and go. Hermione suddenly slammed her fists into Draco's chest, pinning him back onto the wall as he tried to maintain his balance with the pitch and sway of the train. If you think I'm going to turn tail and run away whilst my friends are left here to fight, you're more of an idiot than I thought. And Dumbledore is the greatest wizard of all time, regardless of what the Prophet, the Ministry, or anyone else says. Without pushing back, Draco reached up and caressed the backs of her arms as she pinned him to the wall. He ran both hands up to her shoulders and down her sides slowly as he released a breath. You have to be careful. My father has been talking to Fudge. You know they're in deep together. He went to the Ministry on the day of Potter's hearing. He came home almost happy after the Wizengamot session. I thought at first that Potter had lost. When I learned that he'd gone free, I knew there was something more to his visit. I don't know what it was. Lucius was more tight-lipped after that day. But if he is working with the Dark Lord and the Ministry, it's only a matter of time before they come after you." She relaxed her arms and rose to her tiptoes so suddenly, Draco barely had time to register the kiss before he was deepening it, slanting his lips to meet hers, pouring all of the worry and angst and anxiety he'd felt this summer, turning it into panic and passion for her. She broke away from him and wrenched open the door, closing him inside quickly and making her escape. After another minute of shock, followed by celebration at her kiss, Draco opened the door quietly and returned to his compartment. As they unloaded in Hogsmeade, Draco peered about in the semi-darkness of early dusk, hoping to catch a carriage up to the castle with Hermione. It was a long shot, but stranger things had happened. From beside him he overheard a young girl complaining to her friend. They looked no older than 7, but were evidently old enough to attend Hogwarts. He couldn't have looked so young, he marvelled. "I can't possibly sit in a boat with mudbloods, Sarah. I truly hope they assign us a seating based by blood status. Can you imagine? What if we touched each other by accident?"
Draco turned to her with an angry sneer. "Perhaps you should move your stupid ass and get on a boat before you have to swim the lake to the castle, little girl. If you miss the sorting, it will be certain detention. Get moving."
"Malfoy, there is no need for you to take that tone with a child."
Of course, it was the very witch he'd been searching for in vain minutes ago. She had missed the girl's comments, but had certainly overheard him. The young girl smirked at him, and he scowled his displeasure at being called out. He sighed. This would be a long year if they were publicly on opposite sides the whole time. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Handkerchief by Great78.